She was 16 years old, sitting in a police station with handcuffs on the table in front of her. 6 complaints. 6 families, the mayor's son on one side, a lawyer who billed $500 an hour on the other, and her, one girl from Detroit who had spent 2 weeks saying nothing, taking it, walking away, until she didn't. The detective leaned forward, asked her if she regretted it. She looked at him the way people look at a question they've already answered thousands of times inside their own head. Then she said, "The only thing I regret is waiting so long." The detective asked her one question. Just one. Why didn't you walk away? Zara Cole was 16 years old. She had her mother sitting next to her. She had 8 weeks of things she'd never shown anyone. She looked at the detective and she said, "I did, every single time." They kept following. She didn't look down when she said it. That was the part nobody expected. Cut to 8 weeks earlier, 5:15 in the morning. The garage was cold the way garages are cold in October. Not sharp, just settled. The kind of cold that's been there all night and isn't going anywhere. A single bulb overhead, concrete floor. The smell of rubber and dust and a house that wasn't theirs yet. Zara wrapped her hands, left first, then right, knuckles covered, wrists braced, doing this exact thing, this exact order. Man, her fingers moved without her thinking about them. She didn't stretch, didn't warm-ups slow. She just hit. Jab, cross, hook. The bag swung back and she was already moving. Jab again, elbow, knee. Her breath came in short, controlled bursts, not desperate, not labored. The way breathing sounds when your body has done something so many times it stopped needing your permission. She started training at 8 years old. Her mother signed her up for an after-school program because it was close to the apartment and the price was right. Zara hated it for 6 months. Then one afternoon something clicked. The way things click when your body finds something it was built for. And she never stopped. That was before Detroit felt like something she needed to leave. That was before the boxes. The moving boxes were still stacked in the living room. 12 of them. Denise had said they'd unpack over the weekend. The weekend came and went, and the boxes stayed, and neither of them brought it up again. Some things you don't rush. Some things you leave sealed a little longer than you should, because opening them makes the move real in a way that's hard to come back from. Zara hit the bag harder. Because today was the first day of school, and first days had a weight that no amount of training made lighter. Just something you learned to carry differently when you knew how to stand. The door to the garage opened. She didn't stop, didn't turn. Denise Cole stood in the doorway in yesterday's scrubs, hair still pinned from her Zeitshift, watching her daughter move in the half-dark. She didn't call her in. Didn't say anything at all. She just watched. Then she went back inside. That was how they were now. 2 people who loved each other completely and had learned, over the past 3 years, to take up less space around each other. To watch from doorways. To leave things unsaid, not because they didn't matter, but because saying they required kind of energy that both of them were running low on. 3 years since Zara's father left, not died. Left, packed a bag on a Tuesday when Zara was 13, drove somewhere that wasn't Detroit. The calls got shorter, then stopped. Denise never explained it in words Zara could use, and Zara never asked in ways Denise could answer, since so they learned to carry. To not ask about each other's carrying. It worked. Mostly. It worked right up until it didn't. Breakfast was toast and coffee and about 40 words. "You nervous about today?" "No." Denise looked at her over her mug. She had the kind of face that had learned to stay very still when it wanted to ask more than it was going to ask. "Okay," she said. She refilled her coffee. Zara finished her toast. The real answer was more complicated than no. The real answer was something like, "I'm not nervous, I'm tired," before it's even started. "I'm tired of being new. I'm tired of the specific math of walking into a room and counting who looks like me and coming up with a number that means something about how the next few months are going to go." But it was 6:30 in the morning, and Denise had just worked 12 hours and didn't need complicated, so toast, coffee, forte words. Enough for a Monday in a town she didn't know yet. Mill Haven, Georgia, population 12,000 and something. one high school, one main street with a diner and a hardware store, and a bank whose sign hadn't been updated since the 90s. The kind of town where everybody's family had been there for generations and new people got noticed, discussed, watched. Millhaven High sat on the north end of town. 2 stories, brick that had once been red and was now the color of something tired. 800 students. Morning buses pulling up in sequence. The parking lot already half full when Denise stopped the car at 7:45. Zara had the door open before the car stopped moving. Already walking. I know. She didn't look back. Not because she wasn't scared, but because looking back made it harder. The front doors were heavy. Inside. Industrial floor cleaner, cafeteria food from whatever they were already warming up for lunch, and noise of 800 teenagers in a building before school technically started. A specific kind of noise. She'd heard it in Detroit. It sounded the same here, which was both comforting and not. She stopped just instead of died the doors, or counted. It was something she did automatically now, in every new room. Not something she'd always done. It started when she was old enough to understand what certain numbers meant. This hallway, this morning, 6 faces that looked like hers. 6 out of everything moving and slamming and laughing around her. 6, including herself. She adjusted her backpack and started walking. First period biology. Fine. Mrs. Holt handed her a syllabus, pointed her to an open seat, and didn't make a production out of the new student. Zara appreciated that more than she could have explained. Second period history. Tolerable. She took notes. Answered, when called on. Did the thing where you're present enough that no one thinks it difficult, but not so present that you become interesting. It was a skill. She'd been developing it since 6th grade. Third period English with Mrs. Warren, who had the kind of cheerfulness that was genuine, but slightly exhausting before 10 in the morning. And then, lunch. The cafeteria followed the same social architecture as every school cafeteria she'd ever been in. Popular kids at center tables, athletes in the corner nearest the exit, theater kids by the windows, notebooks open, freshmen in the middle, still figuring out where they were supposed to be. Zara took her tray, looked at the room, found an empty table near the back wall, and walked toward it. She got about 10 steps in. Hey, the voice was easy, relaxed. The voice of someone who had never once in his life had trouble getting people to pay attention to him. She stopped, turned. Brett Calloway was 17, broad through the shoulders, with a Letterman jacket that fit him, like it had been made for him specifically. It probably had been. Good-looking in a way that served him. Warm smile, open expression. She would have believed all of it completely if she hadn't noticed the thing behind his eyes. Still calculating. The look of someone's deciding what to do with something they've found. You're new, he said. Yeah. Brett Calloway. He gestured at the table behind him. 2 guys, one with restless hands and dark hair, one quieter, softer around the edges, picking at the label on his water bottle. Jake, Colton, sit with us. Not an invitation, a direction that sounded like one. I'm good. She kept walking. He fell into step beside her, easy, like she'd agreed. New school takes a while to figure out who's who, how things work. He matched her pace without hurrying. You're from Detroit, right? How do you know that? Small town. He shrugged, word moves. She set her tray down at the table she'd been heading for. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down like she'd invited him. Jake and Colton settled in around her. An audience of 3 that made the table feel smaller than it was. Brett talked. About the school, about Millhaven, about how it was actually a good place once you used things to it. He was good at conversation, the easy kind, the kind that made you feel like the person across from you was doing you a favor by paying attention. Jake laughed at the right moments. Colton smiled when he was supposed to, and looked at his food the rest of the time. And then, right at the end of lunch, when the cafeteria was starting to empty and there was almost something comfortable about the whole thing, Brett leaned forward slightly, his voice dropped. Not threatening, casual. Like something minor that had almost slipped his mind. Oh, one more thing. New students usually put in for a welcome fund. Nothing formal. Just a tradition. keeps things running smoothly. Zara stopped eating. She looked at him. He looked back, still smiling. Warm? Like what he'd just said was the most natural thing in the world. She set her fork down, picked up her tray. She stood up. Brett didn't stand, didn't call after her, didn't change his expression. He nodded once, slow, small, like she'd said something that confirmed something he'd already suspected. She walked to the trash, dumped her tray, and kept moving. In the far corner of the cafeteria, tucked against the wall behind a support column, a boy with a notebook open in front of him had watched the whole exchange. He hadn't eaten much. His food was getting cold. Owen Garrett, the only other black student she'd counted this morning. He watched her walk away, looked down at his notebook. Didn't write anything in it. The harassment started Tuesday. First period hadn't even begun. Her locker combination didn't work. She tried it twice. She'd memorized the numbers. That first morning, she didn't forget numbers. And on the third attempt, she could feel the mechanism catch wrong inside. She looked closer. Gum, packed into the keyhole. Jake Russo passed her in the hallway 2 minutes later, not looking at her. Locks can be tricky, he said, especially damaged ones. He kept walking. She spent 7 minutes getting it open with a pencil and patience, was late to first period. The teacher made a note in her attendance record. Wednesday. Her notebook was gone, not misplaced, gone. She checked her bag twice, retraced a suspect from second period to her locker and back. She found it in the hallway outside the chemistry lab. Colton Holt was standing with a group of freshmen, reading from it in an exaggerated voice. Her handwriting, her notes, made into a performance. She walked up. That's mine. Prove it. He held it just above her reach. One of the freshmen laughed, nervous about it. She didn't grab for it. She pulled out her phone, took a photo. Him, the notebook, the hallway, the freshman watching. What are you doing? Documenting. He threw it at her feet. Pages scattered across the floor. She knelt and collected them one by one. Colton walked away. His jaw was tight. He didn't look as satisfied as she imagined he'd planned to be. Thursday. She was moved out of her biology project group with no explanation. When she asked the teacher looked genuinely confused and said there must have been a mistake, and she'd look into it. There was no group for Zara to be reassigned to. Friday. Chemistry lab. Her safety goggles were gone from her station. Some scratched one-ends from the back cabinet and couldn't read the measurement lines clearly. Her lab results were off. She got a note on her report. Each thing alone was just bad luck. A rough week. These things happened. Together, they were a wall. Invisible. Made of small things. The kind of wall you can't point to because each brick is just a regular brick, and the only person who knows what it adds up to is the one standing on the wrong side of it. She was on the floor collecting notebook pages when she became aware of shoes. Worn sneakers. 3 feet away. She looked up. Owen Garrett, not crouching to help. Just standing there with an expression that wasn't unkind but wasn't soft either. She stood up. Straightened her pages. You need to hear something, he said. Quiet. He glanced both ways down the hall. You have a few minutes? They walked to an alcove near the back stairwell, out of the main hallway flow. Owen talked fast. Not anxious, practiced. Like someone who had thought carefully about what he wanted to say and didn't want to use more words than necessary. Brett Calloway's dad is the mayor of Millhaven, has been for 10 years. His uncle runs the DA's office, district attorney, not police. Brett's family name is on the new wing of the library and the scoreboard at the football field. When Brett wants something to go a certain way in this town, it usually goes that way. He paused. Let that settle. Last year there was a kid, a transfer student. His name was Elijah Monroe. Brett decided Elijah was a problem. I don't know exactly why, but the reason doesn't really matter. What matters is that Elijah left after 6 weeks. The official report said he fell down some stairs. Zara looked at him. You believe that? Owen met her eyes. I believe he didn't come back after the fall. The past period noise filtered in from the main hallway. Lockers. Voices. Sneakers on linoleum because nobody told me. He said it plainly. No drama in it, just the fact of it. When I got here, nobody told me what I was walking into. I figured it out on my own, and by the time I understood it, Elijah was already gone. He looked at her steadily. Whatever you decide to do, I just didn't want you making that decision without the full picture. He stepped back toward the hallway. Owen. He stopped. She looked at him. Why didn't you do anything? When it was Elijah.
Long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer.
I told myself it wasn't my fight, he said. He went back to class. She stood in the alcove alone. Then she went to hers. The English class incident happened the following Thursday. Mrs. Warren was running a discussion on To Kill a Mockingbird. The class was halfway through the book. They were talking about Atticus Finch and what it cost to hold a moral position in a community that was against you. Zara, Mrs. Warren said, with the encouraging tone teachers use when they want to include the new student without making it awkward. Would you like to share your perspective on the themes of racial injustice in the novel? Zara had read this book twice. Once in 8th grade, once the summer before this year, when she'd run out of other things to do during her mother's shifts. She talked for about 2 minutes. She talked about how Harper Lee built injustice into the everyday. Not just the courtroom, but in every small moment where someone chose to look away. She talked about what it cost Scout to see clearly when the adults around her had decided it was easier not to. She talked about the difference between knowing the right thing and doing it, and how the book understood that the distance between those two things was enormous, and almost nobody talked about what lived in that distance. It was the most she'd said in any class all week. When she stopped, the room held a half-second of quiet. Then Brett started clapping. Slow, deliberate. Wow. Warm voice and expression. That was really articulate. For someone from, he paused. Just one beat, just long enough. You know what I mean. It's refreshing. Honestly, not everyone can express themselves like that. 3 students laughed. Small sounds, quickly swallowed. Mrs. Warren opened her mouth, closed it. She was a teacher who had been in classrooms for 15 years, and she understood exactly what Brett had just done. She stood there, and her face moved through several things in quick succession, and she didn't say a word. The silence where she should have spoken was louder than anything Brett had said. Zara looked at Mrs. Warren for 2 seconds, then at Brett. "Thank you," she said. "Level, I'll take that as a compliment to my education." The bell rang. She packed her bag without rushing, walked out like she meant to leave. In the hallway, she could hear Brett laughing with Jake behind her. She kept walking, shoulders down, head up, the way she'd been taught to walk out of a loss. Not like you won, but not like you're beaten either. Like you already know where you're going next. That evening, she went to the garage. 6 p.m. October light through the small window, long and low and golden. Different from the morning dark. She hit the bag and she thought, not about Brett specifically, about structure, about how it worked, about Elijah Monroe, who she'd never met, who had probably done everything right if out, reported things, tried the official channels. And none of it had helped because the channels in this town ran through the Calloway family one way or another. You couldn't report your way out of this. You couldn't be patient enough, or polite enough, or strategic enough within the rules to change what the rules were built to protect. She knew this not because someone taught her, because she'd lived in enough rooms to understand how certain rooms were arranged and for whose benefit. She hit the bag until her shoulders burned. Then she stopped, started again. Friday morning. She got to her locker and stopped. A piece of paper, taped to the door with thick masking tape, placed deliberately, not blown there. She looked at it for exactly as long as it took to understand what it was. An image, cut and assembled. The kind of thing a person makes when they want to communicate something clearly while keeping enough distance to say they were joking. Below it, in handwriting, she recognized from a returned assignment when Brett sat 1 row over. The hallway was moving around her, morning rush students, passing on both sides. A few of them slowed, saw. A sophomore from her biology class made a small sound and looked away. A junior she didn't know stared for a half-second too long, then found something important on his phone. Nobody said anything. Zara stood there. She took the paper down, carefully, folded it once, slid it into the front pocket of her backpack. She took out her phone. Photographed the door, the masking tape still stuck there, the faint outline of where the paper had been against the metal. Then unfolded the paper and photographed that too. Brett's handwriting. Clear. She put her phone away, got what she needed from her locker, closed it and walked. Not fast, not slow. The walk that has a direction. The side door near the gym led out to the back of the school, where the student parking lot ran along the chain-link fence. Brett Calloway was there with Jake Russo and Colton Holt, standing by Brett's car the way they stood most days after third period. Easy, loud, necking up space the way people do when they've never had to think about whether they were allowed to. Brett saw her coming across the parking lot. His expression shifted. Not to guilt, not to fear. To something that looked. This was the part that tightened her jaw, almost pleased. Like this was exactly what he'd been waiting for. She stopped 10 feet away. Change your mind about the fun done. His voice was light, conversational. I'm gonna say sis once. She wasn't performing for the students who'd started to slow and watch. She was talking to him. Whatever this has been, the locker, the notebook, the recording you made, it ends today. Brett tilted his head. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You know what your problem is? He took a step toward her. Not swinging, demonstrating. The step of someone reminding you how big they are. You came in here like the rules didn't apply to you, like you were different. And when someone explains how things work, you act like that's the problem. I came here to go to school, Zara said. That's all. And instead you decided to make enemies. I didn't decide anything. You did. Jake moved to her left. Not a lunge, a cut, closing off the angle. Brett reached for her arm, not asking. Taking, she was already gone. She moved the way she'd been moving for 8 years, not thinking about it, just doing it. She twisted away from his grip, caught his wrist, used the momentum he'd already committed to. Brett stumbled forward into empty space. Jake came in from the left. She stepped into it instead of away. Her elbow connected with his ribs on the way through. He folded. Colton took one step forward, then stopped. His hands came up slightly, not raised to fight, just held out in front of him. He stood at the edge of what was happening, and he looked at Brett stumbling, and Jake doubled over, and something moved in his face that wasn't fear and wasn't calculation. It was closer to having known. Brett got up. His nose was bleeding. Whatever warmth had been in his expression was gone now. All the way gone. He came again, and she met him. What followed lasted less than 2 minutes. Brett was bigger and angrier and committed to it. But committed and trained were not the same thing. She moved around his swings and through his grabs, and every time Hath thought he had her, she wasn't there. Jake tried twice more and found the ground both times. When it was over, Brett was face down on the asphalt. Zara's knee between his shoulder blades. Jake was propped against a car bumper, one hand pressed to his ribs. Colton was standing exactly where he'd been standing the whole time, still not moving. Are we done? She said. Brett said nothing. She pressed slightly. Yeah, flat, scraped, raw. Done. You're gonna leave me alone. No notes, no recordings, no more of any of it. Silence. Are we clear? Clear. She stood, stepped back, watched him roll over and sit up, blood on his lip, parking lot grit on his jacket. 12 students had phones out. She picked up her backpack from where she'd set it on the ground, checked the front pocket. The folded paper was still there, still evidence. She walked back towards the school. She didn't look at Brett. She didn't look at any of the phones. She went through the side door and into the hallway and kept moving because some things, once done, just keep moving through. Behind her in the parking lot, Colton Holt stood in the space where the 3 of them had been. Not helping Brett up, not going to Jake. Just standing there in the gap where 5 minutes ago there had been certainty about how this afternoon was going to go. He looked at the asphalt where Zotza had been standing. He looked at Brett, who was on his feet now, blood and fury and something new in his face, the particular look of a person recalculating. Colton looked away. Inside, 2 teachers had already seen videos on their phones. Principal Linda Oates was pulled out of a meeting. She came outside to find Brett pressing his sleeve to his nose and a cluster of students who had all suddenly developed urgent reasons to be somewhere else. What happened here? Nothing. Brett's voice was controlled. Impressive, given the circumstances. I tripped. Brett, you're bleeding. Wasn't paying attention. Fell. He shook his head slightly, she looked. She looked at Colton, who was studying the ground with great focus. She looked back at Brett. Come to the office. He walked ahead of her, straight-backed, like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just been on the ground in his own parking lot in front of 30 witnesses. Principal Oates followed him and thought about 12 students with phones and the silence that meant everyone knew something and had decided for now not to say it out loud. Not yet. By 4 p.m., the video was up. Sienna Park, sophomore, shaky hands, caption written fast, posted it on her account. Girl at Millhaven High finally fights back. By 6, 8,000 views. By 8, climbing past 35,000. Comments moving too fast to read in sequence, but by 11 p.m., when Denise Cole came home from her shift and set her bag down in the kitchen and stood there in the quiet of the house, the video had passed 60,000. She stood at the kitchen counter and watched it on her phone. Then she put the phone down. She looked at the closed door of her daughter's room. She thought about all the mornings she'd stood in the garage doorway and watched and not asked. All the fines she'd accepted without pushing. All the space she'd given Zara to carry things alone because she'd told herself that was respect. She stood in the kitchen for a while. Then she went to bed. Tomorrow she was going to ask, all of it, from the beginning. No more watching from doorways. Zara dreamed about Detroit that night, not a sad dream, just the gym. The afternoon light coming in through the high windows in October. The same low gold she'd seen in the garage that evening. She realized, same Sangle, different building. The sound of the bag. Her own breathing in the empty room after everyone else had gone home. The way her hands felt after a session done right. She woke up at 5:15, lay in the dark for a moment, got up, went to the garage, wrapped her hands, stood in front of the bag, and started again. Because some things you do because they're necessary. And some things you do because they're the only way you know how to tell yourself you're still you. The video hit 100,000 views sometime around 2 in the morning. Zara slept through it. She found out Monday morning when Sienna Park appeared at her locker before first period, phone extended, face caught somewhere between terrified and lit up from the inside. Have you seen it? Zara looked at the screen, the counter, the comments scrolling too fast to catch individual words. Okay, she said. Okay. Sienna stared at her. It's been shared 5,000 times. There are people in other states talking about you right now. And you're saying okay? Zara took her biology textbook out of her locker. What did she say? I don't know. Something. Anything that sounds like a human person reacting to a situation. Zara's looked at her, relooked. Sophomore, or smart eyes behind the nervous energy. The kind of person who did the brave thing and then immediately started panicking about having done it. Things affect me, Zara said. I just don't perform it. She went to class. The comments were not all good. That was the thing nobody mentioned when they came to find her between periods to say she was incredible. Finally, about time. Nobody mentioned the other current running underneath. Black girls attacks white students. Where's the context, though? Why is she even there if she can't follow the rules? The video showed 90 seconds of a parking lot. A girl who knew how to fight. 3 boys who didn't. It didn't show the 2 weeks before it. Didn't know the fucker. The notebook, the audio cut and rearranged to sound like something it wasn't. The paper taped to her door Friday morning with Brett's handwriting underneath. 90 seconds without context isn't a story. It's a shape. And people put onto shapes whatever they already believe. By second period Monday, Zara understood this. By third period, the town was responding. Mayor Gerald Calloway gave a statement to the local news at 11 a.m. She didn't watch it. But she heard enough from 3 separate people before lunch. Deeply concerned about the culture of violence, hatelessness in our schools. My son and his friends were simply going about their day. We expect accountability. She was eating alone when Owen Garrett sat down across from her. He put his tray down, settled in, and said without preamble, "The mayor did a press statement this morning. I heard. I told you his uncle was the police chief. I was wrong. It's the DA, District Attorney, James Calloway, 8 years in the office." He said it the same way he said everything, flat, factual, no apology in it. "I wanted you to have the accurate information." She looked at him. "Why does the accurate version matter now?" "Because inaccurate information is how people get blindsided when it counts." He unwrapped his test sandwich. "The difference between police chief and DA is the difference between getting questioned and getting charged." She absorbed that. "What do you think is going to happen?" she said. He was quiet for a moment, not avoiding the question, thinking about it honestly. "Brett Calloway has never been told no by anyone who couldn't be made to pay for it," he said. "I've watched him for 2 years. This is the first time someone said no and then proved they meant it in front of an audience." He looked at her. He's not going to let that stand. She already knew that. But hearing it from someone who'd been watching this town longer than she had made it land differently. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said back. They finished lunch. The thing about Denise Cole was that she noticed everything. She noticed tighter shoulders since the move. The morning sessions in the garage running longer each week. The say Zara said 5.5 seconds too fast when asked about school. The cadence of a word that had been rehearsed. She noticed all of it. She didn't push, because Denise had her own carrying to do. Double shifts at a hospital, she was still with the systems, still learning the names, still being the new person who had to prove herself all over again at 43. 2 towns over, early-stage dementia, needing weekend check-ins that drained something different than the work shifts drain. A house full of unpacked boxes. A daughter who had given up everything she knew to move here and was pretending it was fine. 2 people carrying things in the same house. Without telling each other. It had worked in its way. It had been working for 3 years, since Zar's father left on a Tuesday with a bag and didn't come back. Denise had never explained the departure in terms Zara could use, and Zara had never asked in terms Denise could answer, and so they both got very good at the particular skill of loving someone completely while leaving certain rooms in each other's lives unopened. Monday night, 11:15 p.m. Denise came home later than usual. Different shift than the week before. The hospital had moved her schedule. She set her bag down in the entryway and stood in the kitchen doorway and found Zara at the table doing calculus. Zara looked up. Denise sat down across from her, still in her jacket, not moving toward the coffee maker, not doing anything that suggested she was settling for an ordinary end of an ordinary night. "Tell me what's been happening at school," she said. "All of it. From the beginning. Don't manage it." Zara put her pencil down. She looked at her mother. And something let go. She talked for 40 minutes. A theater on day 1. Brett and the welcome fund and the nod that was worse than anger. The locker on Tuesday. The notebook on Wednesday. The project group on Thursday. The chemistry goggles on Friday. Owen's warning about Elijah Monroe. The English class the following week. Mrs. Warren's silence sitting in the room alongside Brett's words. The audio recording in study hall, her voice rearranged into something unrecognizable. The paper on her locker door last Friday morning. Brett's handwriting. Welcome to the jungle. The parking lot. All of it. Denise listened without interrupting once. Her hands were folded in a bubble, and her face was very still in the way it got still when she was working to hold something together. When Zara finished, the kitchen was quiet. "Why didn't you tell me?" Denise said. "Because you already carry enough. Sicensts. Zara, you're doing double shifts. You're dealing with grandma every weekend. You moved your whole life here so I could. Stop." Denise's voice was quiet, not angry. Something more serious than angry. "Stop explaining to me why my life is too full for my daughter." Zara looked at the table. "That's my job," Denise said. "Not a burden. My job. The only one that actually matters to me. Let me do it." The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street. "I should have asked sooner," Denise said. not acknowledgement. The difference mattered. I knew something was wrong and I waited for you to come to me. I should have walked through the door myself. Zara looked up. Her mother looked tired in the kitchen light. The specific tired of some who had been strong for so long they'd forgotten what it felt like not to be. Zara had been watching that tiredness accumulate for 3 years and hadn't said anything about it either. I'm going to call the school tomorrow, Denise said. It might not. I know. I'm calling anyway. She reached across and touched Zara's hand once, briefly. We don't go quiet. That's not how we do things. Zara looked at her mother's hand on hers. Okay, she said. Principal Linda Oates called before Denise could. 7:40 a.m. Tuesday. Professional. Measured. She used the word situation twice and the word incident 3 times and never once used the words harassment or racist, despite having presumably seen the same taper with the same handwriting that Zara still had in her backpack. They met in Oates' office at 8:15. Zara and Denise on one side. Oates behind her desk with a file open in front of her and the expression of a woman navigating between 2 things she didn't want to touch. Zara. She folded her hands. I want to be direct. I've received calls from several families since Friday. There are formal complaints being discussed regarding the parking lot incident. The school board is asking me to address this. Complaints, Denise said. I want to be clear that I'm not here to take sides. Oates looked at them both. I'm here because I believe we can handle this at the school level before it escalates further. If Zara agrees to cease physical confrontations going forward, I think we can. What about the 2 weeks before the parking lot? Denise said. Oates paused. The locker on her first Tuesday. The notebook. The audio recording that was edited to make my daughter sound like something she isn't. The paper taped to her locker door last Friday morning with a racial image and a handwritten note. Denise's voice was perfectly even, unhurried. Are complaints being discussed about those things? Something moved across Oates' face. Not guilt, exactly. The expression of a person watching 2 separate problems move toward each other when she'd been hoping to keep them apart. I'll look into those reports, she said. In writing, Denise said, with a timeline for response. Of course, and I'll want copies of whatever documentation exists. I'll have my secretary, today if possible. The meeting ended shortly after. In the hallway, Zara walked next to her mother and said nothing until they were past the front office window. She's more afraid of the Callaways than she is of doing the wrong thing, Denise said quietly. Yeah, that's not new. We've dealt with that before. She looked at Zara. Document everything from here. Every day. And I'm finding a lawyer today. Tuesday afternoon. Sienna sat down at Zara's lunch table without asking, which Zara was beginning to understand was simply how Sienna operated. Ruby Walsh slid in next to her, quieter, watchful, the kind of persons who assessed a room carefully before committing to anything in it. We need to tell you something, Sienna said. Okay. There are these guys who've been at our bus stop after school. 3 of them, they started about a month ago. She glanced at Ruby. It got worse last Friday after your video went up. Ruby looked at the table. The tall one, bleached hair, he dumped my bag out on the sidewalk, made me pick everything up while they watched. A pause. When I tried to walk away, he grabbed my arm, said I was being rude. Zara looked at her. They said they'd be back today, Sienna said. 3:20. The stop on Maple at 7th. Did you report it? To who? Sienna said. The same principal who just asked you to stop defending yourself. Fair. I recorded part of it. Sienna pulled up her phone. Shaky footage, but clear enough. 3 guys. The bleached hair one, standing over Ruby's scattered belongings, laughing. Zara watched it through once. Would you come with us today? Sienna said. Maybe if they see you. What time'd your bus come? 3:45. I'll be there at 3:10. What Zara didn't know. Walking to Maple and 7th that afternoon was that Owen Garrett was running. He'd been near the equipment shed at the edge of the field during the break between 2nd and 3rd period, close enough to hear 2 people talking on the other side of the fence without being seen. Brett and another guy, older, not a student, someone's cousin or brother. Owen heard the words clearly, Maple and 7th. Just make sure she steps in. He'd text Zazara immediately. She didn't answer. She'd left her phone in her bag after lunch and hadn't checked it. At 2:50, he left school and walked fast. 4 blocks was shorter than it should have been, and longer than he needed it to be. He came around the corner at 3:23 and heard, from half a block away, the particular sound of a confrontation that had already resolved. Zara was already at the stop when the silver car pulled up at 3:19. 3 guys got out. The bleached hair one in front, tall's easy walk, the manner of someone accustomed to being the most significant person in any space. 2 others behind him, bigger but clearly following his lead. He's looked at Zara. Then it's Sienna and Ruby. Then back at Zara. "Who's this?" he said. "Nobody," Sienna said quickly.
Doesn't look like nobody.
He looked at the 2 guys behind him. "She their bodyguard or something?" "I'm someone they know," Zara said.
Can I help you with something? Help me.
He found this genuinely funny. "You hear that?" One of the others moved toward Ruby. Ruby stepped back. Sienna grabbed her arm. "You need to leave," Zara said. "I don't think I do." He stepped closer. "Me and these girls have an ongoing conversation. Private thing, you should probably." He reached for Ruby's shoulder. Zazara moved. She caught his wrist before it reached Ruby. Redirected it. Not a throw, a redirect. Controlled and sharp, enough to pull him off balance and make him step sideways to catch himself. He stared at her. "What the?" The 2 behind him came in. It was over in under a minute. One went down hard. The other backed up fast and stayed there. The bleached hair one looked at his arm, looked at Zara, and something shifted in his face. The specific recognition of someone who has made a significant miscalculation and is only now understanding the size of it. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is." She looked at him still steadily. "If I see you near these 2 again, this conversation gets much shorter." He looked at her for another moment. Then he got his friends up and they got back in the car and left. Sienna let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it since 3:19. "Are you both okay?" Zara looked at Ruby first. Ruby's hands were shaking slightly. "Thank you." She said it quietly, like she meant it past the 2 words. "They were counting on you being too scared to do anything," Zara said. "That's the only way it works." Sienna lowered her phone. She'd been filming from behind her back, angle low, from the moment the car pulled up. "I got everything," she said, "from when they arrived, including him going for Ruby before anything else happened." She looked at the screen. Then up at the street where the car had gone. Owen arrived 4 minutes later, breathing harder than he usually let himself breathe in public. He came around the corner and stopped when he saw the 3 of them standing onto the sidewalk, unhurried, intact. He looked at Zazara, at the empty street, at the security camera mounted on the wall of the convenience store directly across from the bus stop. Angled toward the sidewalk, toward exactly where they were standing. Something moved across his face. "How long ago?" he said. 4 minutes, maybe. Sienna looked at him. "Why?" Owen looked at the camera, looked at Zara. "I need to tell you something," he said. "About those guys and about that camera. Back booth of a diner 2 blocks away. Sienna and Ruby on one side. Zara and Owen across from them." The bleached hair guy's name was Brad Mercer. Owen had confirmed this 3 months ago when Brad showed up at a Millhaven football game sitting with the Calloway family in the stands. Brett beside him. Brett's father 1 seat over, the body language of people who knew each other past the level of acquaintance. First cousins. Then Owen told her what he'd heard at the equipment shed, the exact words, Maple and 7th, 3:20. "Makes sure she steps in." The table was quiet when he finished. "He planned this," Sienna said. "That's what it sounded like. So that camera," Zara looked at Owen, "is going to show you arriving after them and a confrontation starting shortly after." Owen's voice stayed even. Without what came before. Without knowing Brad was already positioned there before Sienna and Rubash arrived, and without the text message between Brett and Brad, "The footage looks like you showed up and started something." Ruby was looking at her phone. "Sienna's footage shows them arriving first, shows Brad going for my shoulder before anything else happened." "That helps," Owen said. "But city-owned camera footage is what gets subpoenaed if this goes legal. And that footage starts when it starts. They sat with that for a moment. How much of the conversation did you hear? Zara said. Everything I told you. Would you say that in front of a judge? He looked at her. If it came to that. She watched him for a moment. Thank you for running, she said. He shrugged. Look at the table. Didn't make it in time. You made it in to tell me what you heard. That counts. He didn't argue with her, but he didn't agree either. She got the sense that Owen Garrett held himself to standards that didn't leave much room for partial credit. By 6 p.m., Sienna had posted the bus stop footage. Caption, same school, different location, same story. The two videos ran together across platforms. People connecting them, reading them as a sequence. Comments came in from students across 3 districts. Kids who'd been quiet about things that had happened to them finding a thread to pull. This is the same girl from the parking lot. Finally someone. There's a whole system protecting these guys, and she just keeps going. By 9 p.m., Brett Calloway's name appeared in comments 40-some times. Zara didn't look at her phone. She was in the garage. Later than usual, the golden light long gone, just the single bulb. She worked through combinations until her arms felt like they belonged to someone heavier than her. Then she sat down on the floor with her back against the wall. Let herself be tired. Not defeated. Just tired. The honest kind that comes after you've done everything right, and the situation still isn't resolved, and you know there's more coming, and your body needs a minute to catch up to what your mind has already accepted. She sat there until the cold of the concrete came through her clothes. Then she got up and went inside. 3 days later, Coach Earl Davis unlocked the gym at 3 p.m. and stood at the edge of the space watching 30 students arrange themselves without being told to. He was a large man in his mid-50s who moved with the particular economy of someone who had trained his body seriously for a long time, and then kept the habits after the competition ended. 6 years as a professional boxer, left on his own terms. 17 years teaching high school PE because the schedule worked and he'd stopped needing to prove anything to anyone, including himself. He watched Zara teach, not fighting, not combination. She was showing a junior named Priya how to break a wrist grab. The mechanics of using an attacker's own grip against them. How body weight what was always the first resource if you understood how to move it. Priya tried it. Got it wrong. Zara adjusted her stance, shifted her hip position, said, try again. Priya tried again. It worked. The expression on Priya's face was something Davis recognized from every gym he'd ever trained in. The moment a person understands for the first time that their body can do something they didn't know it could do, that they have resources they didn't know they had. He'd seen that expression in professional fighters after their first real win. He hadn't expected to see it here on a Tuesday afternoon in a high school gym. He went to his office, got his clipboard, came back. At the end of the session, when students were gathering their things and the noise came up, he walked over to Zara. Where'd you train? She told him. He nodded once. You planning to keep doing this if there's space? Use the gym after hours. I'll sort the paperwork. He looked at her directly. One condition. What? Conflict de-escalation first, every session. Verbal before physical. Physical is last resort, not first option. He paused. That's not negotiable. That was already my plan, she said. He looked at her for a moment. 3 o'clock, Wednesdays and Fridays, keys under the mat. He went back to his office. By the following Wednesday, 60 students showed up. Word had moved the way it moves in high schools, through the unmappable network of who told who in which hallway and which group chat and which bathroom conversation. Students who had never spoken to each other stood in the same space because they had something uncommon that wasn't a class or a sport or a lunch table. They had all been pushed around by something. Zara taught de-escalation first. She meant it. It wasn't lip service to Coach Davis's condition. It was the part she thought mattered most. She taught them to read situations before they escalated, but to identify exits, to use their voices before their hands. To understand that someone trying to provoke a reaction was counting on that reaction, and the most powerful move available was sometimes refusing to give it. Then she taught them how to break a grab, how to fall correctly, how to get distance from someone bigger. She watched a sophomore who had been handing Jake Russo his lunch money since September successfully break a practice hold and look up with that expression. The one Davis had seen, the one that meant I have more than I thought I had. She watched that expression and felt something she didn't have a clean word for. Not pride, exactly. More like recognition. Brett Calloway stood at the hallway window, looking into the gym late Wednesday afternoon. Jake beside him. 60 students inside, more than last week would have suggested was possible. Brett watched Zara at the front, correcting someone's stance. He watched the way the students looked at her. Not like a teacher, not like a coach, like someone who had shown them a door they hadn't known was there. She's organizing them, Jake said. Brett watched for another moment without speaking. His jaw just was tight. The bruises around his nose had faded to yellow. My dad knows the district attorney, he said finally. He turned away from the window. We do this the right way. The meeting was Friday night, 11:30 p.m., a diner at the edge of town, the kind of place that was open around the clock for people who needed somewhere to be when everywhere else was closed. Brett, Jake, Colton, Brad Mercer, 2 guys from Eastfield who were Brad's people, 6 of them in a booth with a chair pulled up one end. Brett laid it out. 6 complaints filed simultaneously, coordinated through the DA's office rather than the school. Assault, battery. The DA was James Calloway. Brett didn't say that part out loud. He just said, the right people in my family has relationships, and everyone at the table understood the architecture. Each person would be assigned a section of the story. They'd prepare separately, file separately, consistent, but not obviously rehearsed. Jake nodded. Brad nodded. The Eastfield guys exchanged a look and nodded. Brett looked at Colton. Colton nodded. He didn't eat anything the entire meeting. Nobody mentioned it. When the booth cleared out and everyone moved to their cars in the empty lot, Colton sat behind the wheel for a while without starting the engine. He thought about Elijah Monroe. He'd been there for most of it 2 years ago. Not doing the worst things. He'd told himself that, and it was technically true. But not stopping them either. Just standing in parking lots, not eating at tables, telling himself it wasn't his fight, and then living with the weight of that for 2 years, which turned out to be heavier than he'd expected when he agreed to it. He thought about Zazara on the floor of the gym, adjusting Priya's stance. Try again. He thought about Zara in the parking lot 4 weeks ago, standing over Brett, asking calmly, "Are we done?" He thought about the expression on her face when she'd looked at Colton afterward. Not triumph, not even anger. She'd just looked at him for a moment, like she was deciding something about what she'd seen. Then she'd picked up her bag and walked away. He sat in the car, started the engine, drove home, lay in bed without sleeping until 2:30 a.m., and when he finally slept, he didn't sleep well. 3 days later, Denise Cole received a call from the hospital. 7:40 a.m. She was halfway through getting ready for a day shift. The caller was the hospital administrator, Gerald Prentice. Professional. Warm in a practiced way. He wanted to talk about Denise's development at Millhaven General, her trajectory, whether she was finding the environment a good fit. He mentioned in passing that the hospital's new cardiac wing had been named for the Calloway family, whose foundation had provided significant funding. He didn't say Zara's name. Didn't need to. Denise thanked him for the call. Said she was committed to her work. Said she looked forward to the appropriate conversations at the appropriate time. She hung up. Stood in the kitchen, hair half done, coffee cooling on the counter. She finished her hair, drank the coffee cold, packed a bag. To work. She did a full shift without saying anything about the call to anyone. That night she came home and sat down in the kitchen without turning on the overhead light. Just the under-cabinet strip, which gave the room a low amber glow that made everything look quieter than it was. Zazara came in from the garage, unwrapped hands, the smell of effort. She saw Denise in the half-dark and sat down next to her, without asking why the lights were off. They sat there together for a moment. They called the hospital, Denise said. Zara was very still. I'm telling you because you need to know what we're dealing with, Denise said. Not so you feel guilty, so you understand the full size of it. She turned to look at her daughter. And so you know it changes nothing about what we're doing. Mom, we don't run. Quiet, absolute. That is not how we do things. You know that. Zara looked at her mother in the dim kitchen light. 3 years of watching her hold everything together. 3 years of deciding not to add to that. I know, she said. Then we find a lawyer tonight, Miss Diana Ford. Office above a dry cleaner on Main Street. A wall of case files going back 20 years. A face that stopped from position somewhere around her early 40s and was sharpie for it. She watched both videos on Zura's phone, read through all the photographs, the locker, the notebook, the paper with Brett's handwriting, every documented incident. Listen to the 2 audio files play back to back, the original and the edited version. She didn't say anything for almost 2 minutes. Then, who sent you to me? Coach Davis at the school. Pro bono. Denise started to speak. Not charity, Ford said. I've been watching what the Calloway family does in this county for a long time. She looked at the photographs again. This is the first time someone has documented it this carefully while it was happening. She looks at Zara. What else do you have? Zara reached into her bag and produced the original folded paper. Still in the plastic sleeve she'd put it in that first Friday evening. Brett's handwriting. The image. Ford looked at it for a long moment. Good, she said, simply. Like someone who had been handed exactly the right tool for exactly the right job. This is good. The formal complaint arrived on a Monday. Zara was lacing her shoes in her room. Denise was in the kitchen, the sound of the coffee maker running. Then the knock at the door. 2 officers. Polite. Doing their job. 6 complaints through the DA's office. Assault and battery. Reckless endangerment. That, one added by Jake Russo's lawyer, arguing the parking lot confrontation had created danger for bystanders. 6 complaints. Coordinated. Simultaneous. Denise had her bag in her hand before the officers finished speaking. Phone already out to call Ford. They walked to the police car together. Zara got in and sat straight and looked at the street through the window. Ordinary morning. A neighbor walking a dog. A kid on a bike wobbling down the sidewalk, still learning. She wasn't afraid of what was ahead. She was afraid of what it was costing. Not her. Her mother, who had stood in a half-dark kitchen 3 nights ago and said, "We don't run," and meant it all the way down. Who had taken a call from a hospital administrator at 7:40 in the morning and gone to work anyway. Who had moved her whole life to a town that was doing everything it could think of to push her daughter out. Zara pressed her hands flat on her knees. She thought about what her trainer back in Detroit had told her once, a long time ago, about the space between knowing something and being able to do it. The distance isn't talent, he'd said. It's not even time. It's the number of times you do it anyway when you don't want to. She looked out the window. Okay, she thought. Then this is one of those times. The car pulled away from the curb. She kept her hands flat on her knees. She kept her eyes on the road ahead. The police station smelled like bad coffee and fluorescent light. Not a metaphor. Just the fact of it. Coffee maker in the corner of the waiting area had been running since early morning, and the plastic cess who worked its way into everything. The plastic chairs, the industrial carpet, the particular quality of air that comes from a room where people sit and wait for things they can't speed up. Zara sat in the interview room with her hands flat on the table, not cuffed, not yet. Just sitting in the particular way you sit when you know someone is watching how you sit, and you've decided to give them nothing useful to read. Denise was in the waiting area with Ms. Ford, who had arrived 14 minutes after Denise called her, wearing a blazer over what appeared to be dark pajama pants, which told Zara something about of lawyer Diana Ford was, and how seriously she was taking this. The detective across from her was a man named Rourke. 50s. Quiet in the way that people who have done a job for a very long time get quiet. Not cold, but settled. He had the looks of someone who had stopped being surprised by things years ago, and was now mostly interested in what was accurate. He set a file folder on the table. Didn't open it. You understand you're not under arrest, he said. I understand. You're here voluntarily. You can leave at any time. I know. He looked at her for a moment. Then he opened the folder, slid a photograph across the table, the parking lot, taken from someone's phone at an angle. Zasra already in motion, Brett stumbling back. What's happening in this image? He said. I'm moving away from a grab attempt. Whose grab attempt? Brett Calloway's. He says he was trying to stabilize you, that you'd been acting erratically, and he reached out to help. Zara looked at the photograph. Then at Rourke. He was reaching for my arm because I'd just told him I was done with his harassment, she said. That's not stabilizing someone. That's stopping someone from walking away. Rourke made a note the bus stop incident, he said, slid another photograph across us. 3 complainants say you approached them and initiated a confrontation without provocation. Those 3 complainants were surrounding 2 younger students. One of them had already reached for a student's arm when I intervened. You intervened by stopping the grab and making sure they understood it wasn't going to happen again. With physical force, yes. Rourke looked at her for a long moment. Not hostile, something more careful than hostile, like a man who was doing his job and had started to develop a private opinion about the job he was doing. You're 16, he said. Yes. You're not nervous. She met his eyes. Should I be? Most people your age are nervous in this room. I haven't done anything wrong, she said. Nervous is for when you're not sure. He looked at her for another moment. He wrote something down. Ms. Ford came in 20 minutes later. She sat next to Zara, buttoned her blazer, and turned the interview into something that ran on her terms without appearing to. She submitted the photographs Zara had been taking since the first week. The locker, the notebook, the paper with Brett's handwriting, the gum packed under the lock. The audio files played back-to-back on Rourke's computer, so he could hear the difference himself. He listened to both files in full. He did not look at Zara during the playback. He looked at the recorder on the table between them. When it finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You documented this, he said, not a question. From day 3, Zara said. He looked at the handwriting on the paper, the image printed below it. He looked at Ford. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, exactly. More like the particular discomfort of a person whose job requires them to pursue something they've just realized might not be what it was presented to them as. We'll need time to review all of this, he said. Of course, Ford said pleasantly. We're available whenever you need us. They drove home in the early afternoon, Denise in front, Zara in back, Ford in her own car behind them. Nobody spoke for most of the drive. Then Denise said, without turning around, You did well in there. I just told the truth. That's what doing well looks like. A pause. Don't underestimate it. The formal charges came 4 days later. Assault, battery, reckless endangerment. That last one added because Jake Russo's lawyer argued that bystanders had been endangered during the parking lot confrontation. Ford called Denise at work. Denise stepped out of the unit, stood in the hallway outside the break room, read the document on her phone in one pass, then went back inside and finished her shift without telling anyone what she'd just read. That night, she told Zara. Zara sat on the edge of the kitchen table and listened, and when Denise finished, she said, That's all. What else is there right now? Denise looked at her daughter. You're not scared. I'm scared, Zara said that. I'm just also right. Both things can be true. Denise sat down. Diana thinks we can beat this. I know we can beat this. It needs 2 weeks to build the case properly. Then we have 2 weeks. Denise looked at the table for a moment, then back up at Zazara. Your father would have been proud of Yao, she said. Not carefully. Just said it. The way you say something when you've been holding it long enough, that holding it is taking more energy than saying it. Zara looked at her mother. I know, she said. It was the first time either of them had said anything about him in almost a year. Not dramatic, not dissolved, just opened. Like a window that had been painted shut for a long time, and finally someone pushed hard enough and it gave. It was enough. For now, 2 weeks. Ford worked like someone who had been waiting for this specific case without knowing she was waiting for it. 3 pillars. First, The audio. Original recording against Brett's edited version, submitted together with a technical report from a sound engineer who had analyzed both files and documented the splice points, the timestamp inconsistencies, the clips sourced from other recordings. The report was 11 pages. It was Ford told Denise on the phone, the clearest case of deliberate audio manipulation she'd seen presented as evidence in a harassment situation. Section. Owen Garrett. He had agreed to testify before Ford even finished asking. She prepped him across 2 sessions, not coaching his answers, just preparing him for the shape of what was coming. Blackwood, Brett's family attorney, was going to come at him on motive, was going to suggest that Owen's testimony was personal rather than factual, was going to try to 3 years of watching Brett Calloway operated in this town look like a grudge. Owen listened to all of it and said, "I know what I heard. Every time he pushes," Ford said. "That's your answer. Not defensive, not angry. Just, I know what I heard." "That's the truth," Owen said. "So that's easy." Ford looked at him for a moment. "Don't let it look easy. It makes juries nervous when things look too easy." He almost nodded. Caught himself. Got third pillar, the convenience store footage. This was the one Ford kept quiet about until 3 days before the trial. She'd gone to the store on Maple Street the week after the bus stop incident. The owner, a man named Garrity, who'd been running the place for over 20 years and had watched the bus stop outside window for most of that time, had a security system that kept 90 days of continuous footage on a drive in the back office. She asked to see the afternoon in question, not 90 seconds, not the clip that Brett's camp had already flagged for the police report. 6. Starting at 3:14 p.m., she watched it alone in the back office. She wrote 4 things in her notepad. Then she asked for a certified copy and mentioned politely that she might need to subpoena it. Garrity said that was fine. He'd been watching what happened at that stop for months. He was glad someone was finally looking at the whole tape. Ford drove back to her office and sat at her desk for a while. Then she called Denise. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I did it to stay between us until the right moment." The night before the trial, Zara lay in the dark and didn't sleep. She thought about walking into Millhaven High 8 weeks ago, the weight of the backpack, the smell of floor cleaner, the counting. 6. She thought about Brett's nod in the cafeteria, that small, slow, confirming nod when she said she wouldn't pay. She'd thought about that nod more than anything else that happened that first day, more than the harassment that followed, because the nod told her everything about what she was dealing with before anything else had happened yet. She thought about Elijah Monroe. She'd never met him. She'd never even seen a photograph. But she'd thought about him more than he probably knew wherever he was now. The fact that he existed, that he'd been in this school before and walked out of it, and the machinery that had made him leave had kept out running without interruption until she arrived. She thought about Mrs. Warren not saying anything, that silence, how it had sat in the room like a third thing, separate from what Brett did and what Zara answered. A silence that had its own weight and its own meaning. She thought about Colton Holt standing at the edge of the parking lot with his hands held slightly out, not fighting. Not help Brett either, just stopped. At the edge. The specific choice of a gets to the edge of something and doesn't go further. Whether it was a weakness or something else, whether there was a difference. She thought about Denise in the kitchen saying, "We don't run," saying it the way you say a fact, not a decision, like it was already settled. She thought about Owen running 4 blocks. She thought about Sienna filming with her phone behind her back. Thought about Ruby saying thank you quietly, meaning it past the words. At some point, past 2 a.m., she fell asleep. At 5:15, she woke up, went to the garage, wrapped her hand, hit the bag until the light changed. The Millhaven County Courthouse had been on the main square since 1934. Old wood and floor wax, and the accumulated weight of a lot of things having been decided sides, some of them correctly. People arrived early, students from Millhaven High, parents, Faces Zara recognized, and some she didn't. Sienna and Ruby in the third row, both of them wearing their school clothes, both carrying the particular stillness of people who have decided to dolt themselves together for something important. Owen in the middle section, alone, back straight, hands on his knees. Colton Holt was there too, in the back row, alone. He didn't look at Brett. He looked at the floor and then at the judge's bench and then at his own hands. Judge Frank Holloway called the court to order at 9 a.m. sharp. Tall, white-haired, 60s. The face of a man who had finished being impressed by things years ago and was now primarily interested in what was true. The people versus Zara Cole. Charges of assault in the second degree and battery. He looked at the prosecution table. Mr. Blackwood. Blackwood was everything his reputation suggested. Silver-haired. A suit that didn't announce itself, but communicated that every choice in it had been deliberate. He spoke in the measured cadence of a man who had been saying important-sounding things for so long that the cadence itself had become persuasive, separate from the content. He built his opening around pattern, not one incident, a pattern of violence. A young woman from a high-crime background who had brought with her a propensity for physical confrontation, who had on 2 separate occasions in the same town attacked multiple people, whose response to normal social interaction was aggression. He used the word escalation 4 times. He was good. Zara sat at the defense table and watched him and gave him nothing. Ford's opening was shorter. She stood up, buttoned her blazer, and said, "The evidence will show that every single action my client took was a direct to something that happened first. We are going to look at that something very carefully. The whole picture, not the selected portion." She sat down. Holloway's expression didn't change, but his pen moved once on the pad in front of him. Brett took the stand first, composed, the right amount of uncertainty in his voice, calibrated, not overdone. He described the cafeteria as a friendly introduction to a new student. He described the parking lot as a confrontation she had initiated, unprovoked, while he and his friends were standing near his car after school. He described reaching toward her as an attempt to de-escalate. Blackwood guided him through it with the smoothness of someone who had rehearsed this route many times. Ford stood for cross. "Mr. Calloway, you mentioned a welcome fund in the cafeteria on Zara Cole's first day. What is that exactly?" "Just something students do. Informal. To help new people feel included." "How much was the contribution?" "I remember the exact amount. Is it documented anywhere? A record of who contributed? Where the money went?" "It's informal. Nothing formal. In the 4 years you've been at Millhaven High, how many new students have contributed to this fund?" Blackwood. Objection. Relevance. Ford. Patter, Your Honor. Goes directly to motive and to context. Holloway. I'll allow it. Brett looked at his hands. "I'm not sure of the exact number. More than 5? Probably. More than 10? Maybe." And Zara Cole was the first student to refuse. Not a question. Brett looked at her. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do," Ford said, "but we'll move forward." Jake Russo testified after Brett. His account was consistent with Brett's too consistent in 2 places. The same phrasing used to describe the sequence of events in the parking lot. The same specific phrase came at us, used by both to describe Zara's approach, unprompted, in the same position in their respective accounts. Ford noted it without dwelling on it. She filed it. The audio came in before lunch. Ford requested permission to play 2 recordings simultaneously. Blackwood objected on relevance grounds. Ford explained the relevance in 2 sentences. Holloway overruled. 2 recordings, 2 speakers on opposite sides of the courtroom. Left speaker, the original English class recording. Zara's voice, clear and measured, talking about Kill a Mockingbird. About how Harper Lee understood that injustice lived in the small moments as much as the large ones. About the distance between knowing the right thing and doing it. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Right speaker, Brett's edited version. The same voice, cut apart and reassembled. Sentences broken and rejoined. Words from other sources inserted. The same voice, rearranged into something that sounded angry and targeted, and nothing like what had actually been said. The courtroom lit to both of them running at the same time for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. When they ended, nobody said anything. 17 people in the gallery were looking at Brett. Brett was looking at the table. His hands, Zahra noticed, were very flat on the table in front of him, like he was pressing something down. Blackwood requested a recess. Holloway gave him 15 minutes. During the recess, Ford leaned over to Zahra and said quietly, "Don't look at him. Don't look satisfied. Look at me or look at the judge's bench." "I know," Zahra said. "I know you know. I'm saying it anyway." Owen Garrett was called after the recess. He walked to the stand the same way he walked everywhere. Unhurried, not performing anything. He sat down, stated his name, his year at Millhaven High, how long he'd been a student there. Ford asked him to describe the cafeteria on Zahra's first day. He described it accurately, completely, without embellishment or interpretation. What he saw, what he heard from where he was sitting. Ford asked him about the parking lot. He described that too. He'd been at the edge of the crowd. He gave the sequence. Brett's hand moving first, the response, the order of events. Ford asked him to describe what he'd heard at the equipment shed on the morning before the bus stop incident. Blackwood. Objection. Hearsay. Ford. Your Honor, this goes to premeditation and conspiracy. The statement is being offered not for its truth, but to show the declarant's intent and plan. Holloway considered for a moment. "I'll allow it. The jury will be instructed on the limited purpose." Owen described what he'd heard, the location, the time. He'd checked his phone immediately after, which he stated plainly. The specific words, Maple and 7th. 3:20. "Make sure she steps in." The courtroom was very still. Then Blackwood stood for cross. He started with background. How long Owen had known Brett, whether they'd had conflicts, whether Owen had personal reasons to want to see Brett in legal trouble.
Owen, question.
Level. Unhurried. "You've never been close with my client," Blackwood said. "No. You've had interactions with him that were difficult. He made my first 2 years at Millhaven High difficult. Yes. So you have personal reasons to testify against him." "I have a personal experience of watching him do this to people," Owen said. "That's different from a grudge." "Is it?" "Yes. No elaboration. Just the word sitting there." Blackwood tried another angle. "You claim to have heard a conversation from the other side of a fence. Is it possible you misheard?" "No. You're some certain. I'm some certain about what I heard. I wrote it down on my phone immediately after." He looked at Blackwood steadily. "I can show you the timestamp." Blackwood looked at his notes. "You said Brett made your first 2 years difficult," he said. "But you never reported any of this to the school, to the police, to anyone." Owen was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. The court waited, because I told myself it wasn't my fight," Owen said. He didn't look away from Blackwood when he said it. "I've had to live with that. I'm not going to make the same choice again." Blackwood looked at him for a long moment. "Nothing further," he said. He sat down. Sienna Park testified about the bus stop. Clear and precise and slightly nervous in a way she didn't try to hide, which made her more believable than if she'd been polished. She described what she'd seen from the moment the silver car arrived. Brad's movement toward Ruby before anything else happened. The sequence. She submitted her phone footage as evidence. Ford had it certified in advance. Ruby Walsh testified after her. Quieter. More careful with each word, like she was paying attention to exactly what she knew versus what she was inferring. "He grabbed my arm," she said. "I tried to pull away. He said I was being rude." She looked at the judge when she said it, not at Brett, at Holloway. I was scared," she said, and then Zahra was there. Brad Mercer's testimony was last from the prosecution's side. He was calmer than Zahra had expected. Coach well. He described the bus stop as a misunderstanding. 3 guys in the area, a girl who approached aggressively. Ford stood. "Mr. Mercer, how do you know Brett Calloway?" "We know each other. From around. He's your first cousin." A beat. "We're family. Did Brett contact you in the days before the bus stop incident?" "We talk sometimes. Did he contact you specifically about Maple Street and the stop at 7th?" I don't remember every conversation. You don't remember. We talk a lot. Ford nodded, picked up her notepad, set it down again. Your Honor, she said, I'd like to introduce Defense Exhibit 7. The convenience store footage for 6 minutes, six on courtroom, starting at 3:14 p.m. First 2.5 minutes, Brad's silver car parks on Maple. Brad gets out. He checks his phone. He looks at the bus stop. Looks at his phone again. Says something to the two with him. They spread out, positioning. Nobody from Sienna and Ruby's group has arrived yet. Nobody minute. Sienna and Ruby arrive at the stop. Brad moves toward them, deliberate, positioned. 4th minute. The confrontation Sienna had filmed begins. 5th minute. Zara arrives. The courtroom watched all 6 minutes without sound, except the ambient noise from the footage itself. A bus going by. Wind. The sound of the street. Ford said, Mr. Mercer, in this footage, you and your companions arrive at that bus stop 2 minutes and 30 seconds before the two students you describe as the other party in this misunderstanding. Can you explain why you were at that specific location before anyone else arrived? Brad looked at his attorney. His attorney gave him nothing. I was just in the area, Brad said. Just in the area, Ford repeated, on a bus route you don't use, in a neighborhood you don't live in. At a time that matched exactly when two specific students from Millhaven High would be arriving at that stop. I don't, Your Honor, Ford said. Defense Exhibit 8. She submitted the phone records. One exchange. Brett Calloway's registered the number to Brad Mercer's timestamp. 2:07 p.m. on the day of the bus stop incident. 33 minutes before the confrontation. The message and 7th. 3:20. Make she steps in. 8 words. Holloway looked at the exhibit. Read it again. He looked up. His expression had changed, not dramatically, but the direction of it was now clear. Black was on his feet. Your Honor, the authenticity of these records was certified by the carrier, Ford said. Documentation is Exhibit 8A. Holloway looked at Blackwood for a long moment. Sit down, counselor, he said. In the back row of the gallery, Colton Holt was looking at his hands. Zara took the stand at 2:15. She sat down, put her hand on the Bible, stated her name and her age. Ford stood. She didn't ask about the parking lot, didn't ask about Brett or the fund or the locker or any of the documented incidents, she asked. Zara's, why didn't you tell your mother what was happening at school? The courtroom was quiet. Zara looked at Ford for a moment, looked at her hands. Because she works double shifts so I can go to school, she said. Because she's been carrying everything by herself for a long time. Because I thought if I told her, I'd be adding some cavi to a weight she was already carrying. She stopped. A beat of silence. I thought handling it alone was protecting her, she said. I was wrong about that. Wrong how? Ford said. Zara looked up, found Denise in the 3rd row. Denise was looking straight at her, hands folded in her lap, face very still. Because she didn't need protecting from the truth, Zara said. She needed me to let her help. And I didn't let her. Not until I had no other choice. She looked back at Ford. That cost both of us more than it should have. Ford nodded once. Nothing further, she said. Blackwood approached for cross. He tried 3 angles. The pattern of violence. She stayed, consistent and specific, correcting his characterizations without becoming defensive. The question of whether she'd misread Brett's intentions, she was calm about it, which was far Blackwood work with than anger would have been. The suggestion that her training made her categorically more dangerous in a physical confrontation. She looked at him and said, My training is the reason nobody got seriously hurt. He sat down after 9 minutes. He'd gotten nothing useful. Holloway sent the jury out at 4:20. The gallows settled into the of a room full of people waiting for something they can't influence anymore. Sienna and Ruby sat together. Owen sat with his arms folded, looking at the middle distance. Denise held a cup of coffee she'd stopped drinking an hour ago. In the back row, Colton Holt sat with his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor. Zara sat at the defense table and was still. Not performing it, actually still. Because she had done everything available to her, all of it. From both the first photograph on day 3 to 2 hours ago on that stand. She had done it correctly, and she had told the truth fully, and what happened next was in a room she wasn't in. That was its own kind of hard. The kind you couldn't train for. The kind where the only move available was to sit with it. She sat with it. The jury returned at 5:45, 1 hour and 25 minutes. Holloway took his seat. 4 seconds of silence while the room absorbed that the waiting was over. He looked at the foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor, on the charge of assault in the 2nd degree. Not guilty. The room breathed. The charge battery. How do you find? Not guilty. On the charge of reckless endangerment. How do you find? Not guilty. The room didn't explode. There was a half second, the length of a breath where it absorbed what the best bed. Then, Sienna made a sound, small, the sound of something releasing. Ruby put her face in her hands. Owen sat very still for a moment, and then his shoulders came down, just slightly, in a way that told you how long he'd been holding them up. Denise closed her eyes. Ford set down her pen, and Holloway was still speaking. Furthermore, the room went quiet again. This court notes serious concern regarding evidence of coordinated false testimony and deliberate entrapment presented over the course of this proceeding. I am referring the complete case file to the District Attorney's Office. A pause. The State District Attorney's Office for review of potential perjury and conspiracy charges against the complainants. He set down his papers. This court is adjourned. The gavel. Zara stood up. Ford was beside her, saying she'd hear properly later when the room made more sense. She nodded. She turned and found Denise already moving through the low gate between the gallery and the defense area. They met in the middle. Denise hugged her daughter. Not the careful kind. Not the kind calibrated to the weight of what they both carried. The other kind, the kind that doesn't calculate anything, that just holds on. Zara's held on. She didn't say anything. Denise didn't say anything. Some things don't need words right away. Some things need to just be what they are for a moment before language gets involved. Over her mother's shoulder, she saw Owen making his way toward the exit. He glanced back, found her eyes, nodded once. She nodded back. She saw Colton Holt in the back of the gallery, standing a little apart from everyone. Not leaving, not celebrating, just present. He caught her looking and didn't look away. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she let it go. Not forgiveness. She hasn't decided about forgiveness yet, and she wasn't going to decide it in the next 30 seconds to be tidy about it. Just release, setting it down, moving forward without dragging it. What came after didn't arrive all at once. That was the thing about the end of something like this. It didn't close like a door. It closed the way a season closes, gradually, unevenly, still unfinished in as well done in others. Brett Calloway was gone from Millhaven within 2 weeks. No announcement. The house listed a month later. The Calloway name on the library wing and the football scoreboard stayed. A budget matter, someone said. These things take time. Nobody rushed. The state perjury investigation opened. Ford said it would take months. It would likely end in plea agreements rather than trials. That was how these things usually went. Jake Russo's college scholarship was revoked before anything was formally charged. The university made a quiet decision based on publicly available information and released a statement that said very little. Tommy Holt, who had not been part of the filing, who had sent a plain envelope to a lawyer's office and written 4 words on a slip of paper, was not charged. He finished the year at Millhaven and nobody talked about it much. Brad Mercer's was expelled from Eastfield High the week after the verdict. His 2 associates received suspensions pending separate review. Principal Oates called Denise 5 days after the verdict. The conversation was longer than their first meeting and quieter. Oates did more listening. She implemented new reporting protocols within the month. Written documentation, 48-hour mandatory response windows, third-party review for complaint involving students with institutional connections in the district. She didn't call it what it was. Everyone knew what it was. Coach Davis told Zara about the new policies at the next session. She's not the same as she was in September, he said. People change. Change when the cost of not changing gets high enough, Zara said. Davis looked at her. That's either cynical or accurate. Probably both. He didn't quite smile. He almost never did. But something shifted in his expression that was adjacent to it. The foundation program ran twice a week, then 3 times. By April, the waiting list was longer than the current roster, which was itself longer than anything Davis had predicted when he told Zara to use the gym. She added Saturday mornings. Davis opened the facility early and sat in his office with bad coffee and his clipboard, watching through the window. He saw things he hadn't expected. He saw Priya, the junior from the first session, the one who'd made that expression when the wrist break worked. He saw her teaching Seam Tekti, a freshman, adjusting the girl's stance with the same precise that Zara used. Patient, specific. He saw the freshman try it wrong, try it again, get it, and look up. That expression. He saw Ruby Walsh, quiet Ruby, who'd spent a month flinching at sudden movements after the bus stop, correcting someone's footwork with a steady voice. He saw the kid who'd been handing money to Jake Russo since September, standing in front of the mirror along the gym wall, practicing the way he stood. Just that. Practicing standing up, straight, shoulders back, weight even, like it was something he had to learn on purpose. He made a note on his clipboard, drank his coffee. Owen Garrett came to a session in March. He stood at the back for 15 minutes watching. Zara saw him when he arrived and didn't say anything. Let him stand there. Then, she says to the room, "We're doing verbal de-escalation today. Who hasn't been through this section?" Half the hands went up. Owen put his hand up. She worked through it. The de-escalation section was the one she spent the most time on because she thought it was the most important. Not because it was easier than the physical techniques, but because it required something different. It required you to stay present and deliberate inside a situation that was actively trying to pull you into reaction. To choose in real time, not to give the room what it was demanding from you. After the session, when people were gathering their things, Owen came over. "That section," he said, "the verbal piece. I'm good at that. I know." He looked at her. "How do you know?" "I watched you in a courtroom for 2 days," she said. "Blackwood pushed you 9 different ways. You didn't move." He was quiet for a moment. "Would you want to co-teach it?" she said. He considered it. Not performing consideration, actually thinking. "Yeah," he said. "I would." He came back Wednesday and Friday, and the following Saturday. He was better at the verbal section than she was. Better at explaining the internal piece of it. What was actually happening in your body when someone tried to provoke you? What the choice felt like from the inside. How you practiced making it before you needed to make it for real. He knew it from the inside because he'd failed at it for 3 years and then succeeded at the moment it counted most. That combination made him a better teacher of it than someone who'd always found it easy. One afternoon in late April, Sienna came to find Zara after the Wednesday session. She was holding a letter. Physical mail, which had been sent to the school office and forwarded. "This came for you," she said, trying and failing to look like she hadn't already read the return address several times. The return address was a high school in Ohio. Zara opened it, a junior. She'd seen both videos in October. In November, she'd started a peer support group at her school, 14 members, growing. They'd had 3 situations each semester that had been talked through and de-escalated before reaching administration. One student had come forward about something that had been happening for 2 years. "I didn't know we were allowed to do something," she wrote. "Your story made me think maybe we were." Zara read it twice, folded it carefully. Put it in the front pocket of her backpack, where she kept the things that mattered. "How many is that?" Sienna said. "4th one. From 4 different states." "Yeah." Sienna looked at her. "You understand what's happening, right? You understand that." "Someone in Ohio started a support group," Zara said. "That's what's happening, and that's theirs. They did that." She zipped the pocket. "I didn't do that. They decided to." Sienna stared at her. "You are genuinely the most frustrating person," she said. Zara almost smiled. "You've mentioned that. May, end of the school year. Cafeteria, The same cafeteria, same industrial light, same layout. But the architecture of who sat where had shifted over 8 months in ways that were hard to point to individually but obvious when you looked at the whole room. The center tables didn't belong to anyone in particular now. Students from different grades sat near each other because of proximity and conversation and shared classes, rather than because of who was watching. Zara sat with her lunch. Sienna across from her, Ruby next to her. Owen at the end of the table doing homework, occasionally looking up when something in the conversation near him was interesting enough. Sienna was telling a story about something that had happened in third period. She was a good storyteller. She had timing and she knew how to build to the part that was actually funny. Ruby was laughing before the punchline. Owen had put his pencil down. Zara looked around the room while Sienna talked. She looked at the table in the center where Brett Calloway used to hold court. Jake on one side, Colton on the other. The whole room arranged around them like they were a weather system that everyone else had to navigate around. That table now held a group of juniors who sat there because it was convenient and the light was good near the windows. Just a table. She looked at the corner where Oolstoon used to sit alone with a notebook open in front of him and food going cold. She looked at the freshman who'd been paying Jake Russo since September. Now 3 tables over, mid-conversation with people his own age, completely unguarded, laughing at something with his whole face. She looked at Priya showing someone a hand position right there in the cafeteria, mid-lunch, because she'd just done it absently, and the person next to her had asked what that was. Not fixed, not finished, not even close to everything it should be, but different. The room felt different in its bones. Sienna got to the punchline. Ruby laughed. Owen made a sound that was the closest he usually got to laughing in public and went back to it. Zara opened his. 8 thought about nothing particular, or everything at once. Sometimes those felt like the same thing. After school, she went to the garage. 5:30. The light was different in May. Longer days, the sun still well up, coming through the small window at a lower angle than October, making a different shape on the concrete floor. She wrapped her hands, stood in front of the bag, thought about the garage in Detroit, the gym. Her trainer's voice, patient, precise, the same correction offered for the 7th time, without any less attention than the first time. Thought about Millhaven and this garage, and the buzzing bulb, and the cold concrete and 8 weeks that had changed the shape of things. Thought about Denise in the kitchen this morning, making kunka, humming something half-remembered. The specific sound of a person who is tired but not defeated, who has set something heavy down, who is still here. Thought about Owen saying, "I'm not anymore in a courtroom," in front of 60 people who needed to hear someone say it. Thought about the letter from Ohio. I didn't know we were allowed to just do something. She hit the bag, jab, cross, hook, elbow. The combinations ran the way they always was, had automatic, instinctive. Part of her body now, in the way that things become part of you when you do them long enough and seriously enough. When you do them in the dark at 5 in the morning and in the golden afternoon light and every kind of moment in between. But something was different, not the combinations. Those were her. She was lighter. Not lighter like the weight was gone. The weight was still there. The real kind always was. Lighter like she understood it better now. Like she'd stopped separately from everything else and let it just be part of what she was, if caring, which made it part of her, instead of something pressing sound on her from outside. She hit the bag until her arms burned. Then she stopped, stood still. Outside, kids on bikes somewhere down the street. A lawnmower 2 houses over, a car radio with the windows down, something she couldn't quite identify but with a good beat. The ordinary sound of an ordinary Tuesday. She unwrapped her hands, went inside. Denise was at the stove. Something that smelled like garlic and something else she couldn't name yet. How was the session? Denise said without turning around. Good. Owen taught the verbal section. 40 minutes. Nobody wanted to stop. He's good at it. He's better at it than I am. Denise glanced back. I know. Don't tell him I said so. Zara leaned against the counter. looked at her mother at the stove, the ease of her movements, the hum she'd been doing this morning still going, low and half absent. I got another letter today, Zara said. Ohio this time. Denise turned down the heat, turned around. What did it say? Zara thought about how to say it, found the words that were accurate. That someone had decided they were allowed to do something, she said. Denise looked at her daughter. Good, she said. Just that word. The way she said things when the thing being said was complete already and didn't need anything added to it. She turned back to the stove. Zara stayed leaning against the counter. The kitchen was warm. The evening light came through the window above the sink at a low angle and made the room look like something worth keeping. Outside, the lawnmower stopped. The car radio dazed the street. The house was quiet in the way a house is quiet when the people in it are okay. Not finished, not resolved into something clean and permanent. Just okay. Right now, in this kitchen, on this Tuesday evening, Zest looked at her hands. The lines where the wrapping had been. The familiar weight of them. She had done things with these hands that couldn't be undone. Some of them she'd do again. Some of them she'd learned from. All of them had led here, to this kitchen, this light, her mother at the stove humming something half remembered, to this, which was ordinary, after everything, just ordinary. And that, she understood now, was not a small thing. That was the whole point.